Hello. It's March 13th. It's just after 10:30 in the morning, and I'm starting something new. My name is Andrew, and this here, me talking to you, is the next step in my healing journey. And talking to you about it, talking to you about my healing journey, talking about what healing means to me, and why I feel it's important, and also where it fits into the world that we live in. I'm extremely nervous because I've never done this before, and in my own healing, uh, being vulnerable is the hardest thing that I've had to learn in life, and it's been that way for me for a very long time. And I'm hoping in the course of many of these moments I'm going to share with you that that something good happens. And it's hard for me to quantify because reaching out like this is new, and it's me accepting that I don't know the outcome, and that I'm in something that I don't understand, and yet it's not negative. In fact, that's the first step. So here I am. I'm starting it with you. I'm starting this moment, and it's for me, and I'm hoping that it's got something of value for you out there as well. We'll see. We'll see as time goes on. So where I've decided to start today is by talking about two people that I really respect and who have influenced me, and when they interacted, and what happened, and how that has shone a light into the place where I sit and the place where I feel my place is. So the first person is Sadhguru, and if you haven't heard of Sadhguru or listened to him talk, I really recommend that you do that. I think that he's a beautiful, enlightened man, and he's got value, he's got skills, he's got wisdom, he's got intelligence, he's got something good. I listen to him a lot, and as a matter of fact, I'm in my 50s, and I've been working all my life on trying to get better, trying to be whole, trying to be a good person. And I don't think it's something that we can ever go towards. It's something we discover inside ourselves. And if we've become dissociated from that part of ourselves for whatever reason, which is again the substance of my healing journey, it's a process not of going outside but coming inside. And so Sadhguru is someone who has helped me get inside and has activated a bunch of things that I've learned in my life from other sources, like Carlos Castaneda, for example. Again, young people may have no idea who that is. He was a spiritual, mystical writer, teacher of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. He died in the late 90s. And his work really influenced me. For some reason, his work really spoke to me and helped me in lots of ways. But it would come to a point where I'd reach limitations, and then I'd seek other avenues to try and understand places where I was stuck. And lately, even though I've known about Sadhguru for a number of years, lately, I don't know, when I hear him talk, Sadhguru is activating all these things in me that are like pieces of other information that I've taken, particularly from Carlos Castaneda, and he's helped it open up and blossom inside me. So this is why I feel Sadhguru is a really important person in my life, and I recommend to anyone to listen to what he's got to say. Anyway, so Sadhguru, you find him on YouTube, you find him everywhere. One day, I came to look at some Sadhguru to think about things, and there he was on Joe Rogan's podcast. Joe Rogan, another guy I love. Joe, I mean, who doesn't love Joe? I know lots of people don't love Joe, but whether you love him or hate him, it's his spirit of inquiry. It's his realness. He's a real guy. He's a real man, and I respect him because I'm a fighter and I'm a fight fan. So I've listened to him and watched him for years with the UFC. I've listened to his and seen his stand-up comedy, wickedly funny guy. All comes from his realness. And his podcast is this authentic spirit of inquiry. He's genuinely interested in what's going on. And the people he invites in his show, it's real. You may agree, you may disagree with what's being said, but it's the fact that it's happening in this world of shallow offense and ignorant, opinionated, closed-mindedness and ignorance and all the violence and hostility that just divides us all. I find Joe is a breath of fresh air, and I love his podcast. And so here, Sadhguru is on Joe's podcast. And I was like immediately interested in what was going to happen. And there's Sadhguru, and Joe, he looked a little different talking to Sadhguru because, I think he likes Sadhguru. I think he appreciates what he's saying. So having him on his show, he was interested in exploring a dialogue and engaging with Sadhguru's wisdom. And so, Sadhguru's giving all of his things that are going on for him and his wisdom and his knowledge, his inner engineering, as he calls it. I mean, I'll talk more about him in other moments. In this moment, he was just presenting his wisdom and his knowledge, and I'm going to gloss over a lot of the conversation. Go watch it for yourself. It's a great moment. Joe is there, and he's listening. He's agreeing with Sadhguru. He's interested in what he's saying. He's interested, but just like a good fighter, and a good fighter who's also good at sparring. He's a part of the fight team. You know what I mean? He's listening to Sadhguru. He wants Sadhguru to give more of his wisdom. So he gives him a look, like in sparring. He says, "Well, what would you say to someone who's about 30, who's got a trauma history, who's struggling with alcoholism, who's got traumas and they're struggling and they want to get better and they don't know how? What are the steps? How do you get there?" So I say it's a look, because I really got a sense of Joe as a fighter there, like he's not against Sadhguru. He's just giving him a look. How do you respond to this? As a fighter, I hear what you're saying. What do you say to this combination? And I found in that moment that Sadhguru just kept on sort of repeating the same wisdom and the same knowledge, because he's not reaching out to people. He's waiting for people to reach to him. When you're ready to heal, you find someone like Sadhguru, he's going to be able to help you, right? But what Joe is doing is illustrating that many people in the world and in our North American society are not ready to heal. They're stuck. They're stuck in their trauma history. They're stuck in their abusive patterns. They're stuck in their addictive patterns. And again, this is where I enter, right? This is why this dialogue is really interesting to me, is because this is where I exist. I work in mental health and addictions. And so when Joe gave him that look, I was interested. What will he say? How is Sadhguru going to approach someone like that? But unfortunately, I found that he just didn't really. He just was still just sort of staying within his poise and within his presence, and allowing Joe to come to him, whereas Joe's staying in his situation, trying to draw him out. And in the end, it was valuable, but I felt a gap, personally. I felt a gap there. And the gap actually is where I am in terms of where I heal and where my healing is. I'm healing my traumas. I'm healing my issues of mental health. I'm healing my addictive issues. I'm healing all those things in the moment. And with my work with people in mental health and addictions, I'm dealing with the people that Joe, for example, represented in the look that he gave to Sadhguru. That 30-year-old person who's like a trauma survivor and got bad patterns and whatnot, right? And so here's where I enter. I was like going, wow, I wish I was there. I could have totally joined in that conversation. I would love to join in that conversation. Not only because I love both those men, but because that's what I do. That's what I do. That's what my presence is. I'm not like Sadhguru. I'm not a part of a deeply spiritual system and culture and history. He comes from the Vedic tradition of India, you know. I'm just learning a little bit about chakras and energy and how energy flow and our physical existence attaches to the inner reality, you know, like I'm on that journey. And I do feel, though, that as a North American person like Joe, I really resonated on the other side as well with Joe's position and Joe's presentation of like, well, how are you going to help someone who's not ready to heal, right? Sadhguru didn't really have an answer to that. And I don't have the answer to that, but I can tell you from working in the field of mental health and addictions, some things which give space to that realm. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is the trans-theoretical model of change. And so this is a concept that comes out of dealing with people in a crisis of addiction and what addiction means, right? If someone is going to change their lives and be healthier, what is the process that they're going through? And so the trans-theoretical model of change is a way of understanding how someone's consciousness changes over time. And so it's like this. There is steps in the process of change. The first step is called pre-contemplation. Pre-contemplation is, as it sounds, there is no thinking about what's going on. There's an unconsciousness. There is no consciousness of the behavior. It's just, say, in addiction, it just means I'm using this substance, I'm in this pattern. There's no problem. There is no problem at all. And when you're dealing with someone who is in a state of pre-contemplation, there is no conversation. There's no conversation. There's no change dialogue about anything that's happening for them. They're just doing their thing, and they're ignorant of any problems whatsoever. Stage one. Stage two is called contemplation. And so something has happened, or some things have happened. And this person who is still stuck in these very unhealthy patterns and an unconscious, compulsive manner of being, suddenly they're thinking about it. Contemplation, it means they're thinking about it. Change hasn't come yet. Contemplation just means they're thinking about it. Thinking, thinking but not willing to change. I know something's wrong, but this is still just what I do. This is what I do. This is what I deserve. I mean, who knows what thinking process is going on? That's the process of contemplation. One begins to think about it. The thinking has begun, okay? And the next step after that is called preparation. They call it preparation because it's still thinking. It's still contemplation. The person is still thinking about changing. But what happens, and it's like, this sounds like it's arbitrary, but I can tell you in practice, it's real. It happens. As people go through this process, you can hear this change in language. And preparation stage is a change of language. Suddenly, there's a time frame, and it's nearby. It's a couple of months. It's 1 or 2 months. It could be weeks, 6 weeks, maybe 3 months. In that zone, that's preparation. Someone's contemplation has begun to take a step towards activity. They're coming to a place where you know what? Soon. I'm going to hit that program soon. I'm going to try and quit soon. Like whatever that language might be, it's got a time frame to it. They're on their way towards change. Okay? That's preparation. The phase after that is called action, and the person is taking action. They try to quit the substance. They're joining a group. They're doing it. Whatever it's happening, it is not projected into the future. It's happening right now. They're doing it. Action. And so that, to me, that's the act of healing. When someone's in action phase of trans-theoretical model of change, that this concept of how to understand someone's movement towards changing themselves, action is active healing. They're going to heal themselves. This is the point where if they can change their lives, it's happening. They're actively involved in their own change, in their own healing, in their own recovery, often we say, in the field. After that, the next phase is called management and relapse. And so management means you've taken action, you've made the change. Now it's a question of sustaining the change you have created in your life. And when it comes to addiction, Relapse, of course, is always going to be that you slip off, you use it, you get it, you go through another pattern of like getting your fix, whatever it might be. The key is not to dwell in the shame or the embarrassment or the negativeness of the relapse, but how quickly you return to your healing process, your sobriety, however you want to talk about it, right? So relapse is a part of maintenance because that pattern is always there. Maybe you heal yourself, you do it and it's done and you never use again or whatever it might be. For most people, there's going to be a process of it recurs. It'll happen again. That negative pattern, whatever it is, will happen again. Don't beat yourself up. Relapse happens. Just see how quickly you can get yourself back into the healthy rhythm. So that's trans-theoretical model of change. And when I imbued the word healing into action phase, because until someone is ready to act and take action, there is no healing. They're not ready to heal, And so again, turning back to that conversation with Joe and Sadhguru, Joe's given Sadhguru the look. He's this beautiful fighter. He's given him the sparring opportunity to say, okay, well, how do you mobilize your wisdom for someone like this? Someone who's not ready to change yet, right? Someone who's pre-contemplative or contemplative, or maybe even at the level where they're ready to make change, but it's just slightly in the future, maybe just a month or two away. What do you say to this person? I didn't find that in that moment Sadhguru had any really good answers. And there's no fault of that. He needs people who are in action phase. If you're ready to heal yourself and you're ready to take action in your own life, Sadhguru is an incredible resource. But if you're not ready, I think that there's going to be a barrier between an individual and Sadhguru's wisdom. And I think Joe pointed that out in a beautiful way. I just love Joe more because of how he showed Sadhguru's limitation. Not to criticize Sadhguru, he is an enlightened man, but at the same time, in this world of suffering that we're in right now, a lot of people are exactly what Joe is picturing, and how then do we help them? So the trans-theoretical model of change, which I've just described, and also I feel personally that's where Sadhguru can help people is when they've reached action stage and they're ready to take action in their lives, or maybe maintenance, where they're like, okay, now I've got this good thing going, I'm healing, I feel a little more in control of my life. What can I do to enrich myself? Someone like Sadhguru is right there. The thing is, when we're working in mental health and addictions, most, if not all, the people are not ready to heal. So it's true. There's a gap there, just like the gap between that Joe showed between his example of someone who's in a trauma addictions, cycle, and Sadhguru's wisdom. The gap is the gap described by pre-contemplation phase, contemplation phase, and preparation phase. These are the zones of development that someone goes through prior to any actual active healing. Most people who are in the mental health system and who are struggling with addiction are in somewhere in that phase. They have not come to the place where they're ready to actively heal in their lives. Now, there's another concept that's coming to prominence, in the field and in society at large. It's called harm reduction. And harm reduction means literally you're dealing with someone who's hurting themselves with addiction, with delusional ideas, with how voices are tormenting them, with their unhealthy behaviors. It's vast. The spectrum is as vast as there are people. Harm reduction means you meet someone where they're at and you're not judging them, you're not criticizing them, you're not hindering them by saying they're not doing the right thing. What you do is you meet them where they're at. You meet that person in pre-contemplation. You meet that person in contemplation. You meet that person who is preparing maybe to take action. Harm reduction the principle is you help them reduce the harm that they're doing themselves. And I find that when you have an authentic dialogue with someone, and by authentic, I mean, and I'm going to have some more terms here. The key term when you're in the field of mental health and addictions is unconditional positive regard. That's a nice clinical phrase, it gets used all the time. But what we're talking about here is loving someone unconditionally. Unconditional positive regard is unconditional love for someone. Maybe they're acting like an asshole towards you. Maybe they're violent. Maybe they're hostile, or maybe they're just sad and depressed and lost inside themselves. Wherever it is, you meet them where they're at, and you're just there with them. You're there with them, and you just have that dialogue. And that dialogue is the non-judgmental dialogue. That unconditional positive regard is where you mobilize harm reduction, and that is something which is helpful in a way that I can't put all into one talk or just one group of words here, right? But that harm reduction, when you're meeting someone, you join their thinking when they're contemplative, or if they're pre-contemplative, you're just pointing out things. Well, if speaking in the terms of addiction, what are you getting out of the fix? What are you gaining from it? You know what I mean? Like you find out where their interests are, where their hooks are, where their fix is, and also inevitably in that same conversation, you find out where their hurt is, where their pain is, where the trauma history is, and it's almost always trauma. It's almost always trauma, and in that regard, being trauma informed is crucial. It's another key aspect in mental health and addictions, is being trauma informed, which is to be sensitive that any unhealthy behavior that you're witnessing and in the presence of is most of the time based on trauma, most of the time based in trauma. And so being sensitive to that means that as you're in a dialogue with someone in one of these phases of pre-contemplation, contemplation, or preparation, where they're not ready to actively heal themselves, right? You're going to discover pain. You're going to discover trauma history. You're going to discover all of the painful life experiences which have given rise to these unhealthy behaviors, unhealthy ideas, unhealthy thoughts and emotions. Being trauma informed, then, sensitivity to those realities. So as that conversation happens and you're present and you're not judging, you're in a state of harm reduction, you will find that person will begin thinking about things. It's just natural. We're social, and most people are open to connection. And if you offer that connection authentically, so as someone in mental health and addictions, my authenticity is often that is the dimension of the conversation that I'll share with someone who is struggling with whatever they're working on. My authenticity, my healing, my openness is the space that we can then share, right? This is why I feel it's important to share my healing journey and why I'm doing this, why I'm struggling to be vulnerable in front of you and describe this and describe how Sadhguru and Joe affected me in illustrating this gap. And this gap is the work in mental health and addictions in the field. And there are concepts which describe how to interact with people before they're ready to take active steps in healing, which is what Sadhguru is talking about, right? And so, and so my own healing is the key piece in my capacity to be able to be present for others in their journey. And if they're not ready to be healing, if they're only thinking about it, if they're contemplating it, or if they're ready to take an action, but it's not immediate, it's in the future, I'm there to help continue that dialogue, as a helper. And yet, you cannot be attached to an outcome. That's the thing. Outcomes happen when someone is healing, Prior to someone healing, they're in this zone where they're still doing damage. They're still trapped in the negative patterns, And so being guided by harm reduction, being knowledgeable of the stage of change that someone is in, and then being present in that is how people can develop their own insight into what's going on inside them. And as those steps occur little by little, and it can happen with people even with severe and persistent mental illness, you can see people just make little gains, sometimes little micro gains. Sometimes people can be so damaged and so injured by the traumas of life that their capacity to make positive change in themselves is very, very small. And so you have to have a lot of sensitivity in order to be able to recognize and be present with someone as they're making these small steps. And by the way, all that I'm describing to you here in terms of trans-theoretical model of change and harm reduction and trauma-informed care and unconditional positive regard, you can also encapsulate these into the technique, the therapeutic technique of motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is essentially, they picture it as in a metaphor, a picture. It's the dance. You're dancing with someone. Think about that. You're just sharing a moment. A conversation is like a dance. Right now, this is a monologue. I'm just talking to you, but hopefully as you hear what I'm saying, and hopefully you can feel my authenticity in what I'm trying to describe here, you're perhaps responding in your own way. There is a kind of dance going on here, you know what I mean? But it's abstracted because of the medium that we're sharing here. If we were talking in person, there'd be a back and forth. There would be a kind of dance. And it's not about the outcome. It's about the process of what we're sharing. I'm trying to share aspects of my healing journey, aspects of working with people in mental health and addictions, something that I identify with myself, Somehow, the dance is how we get better. We move together, right? And the key part of the dance is, what is the music that we're listening to? What is the music? This is where Sadhguru is a beautiful teacher, because he points out that the music is within inside us. The music of change is a feeling of love inside ourselves. And the negative patterns that we're caught in, the trauma history, which dislocates us from our being inside, the addiction, which we use to replace the connection in our lives. As Dr. Gabor Mate says, addiction is the opposite of connection. Somehow, through trauma history, most of the time, someone has become disconnected from their own life, from the people around them. And the only thing they can fill that gap of loneliness and pain is addiction, Or in mental illness, it's delusional ideas or absorption in some kind of unhealthy way of thinking about the world that creates paranoia or creates grandiosity, which separates the person from others. It's as unique as there are people. The point being that when you're talking about someone who's in a crisis or in an unhealthy place, whatever's going on inside them or outside of them, it's come between them and the life that they're living. It's become between them and their true being inside, which is their experience of joy in life. My little rule of thumb is that addiction is mental health for extroverts, which means it's a compulsive pattern which has found an object in the outer environment. This is why we have a very moral fixation with people who are addicted, is because we see it in the external environment. We think, well, we've got control over our actions, therefore it's a moral failing on the individual. But the compulsion, that compulsion thing is as strong as someone who suffers from a severe and persistent mental illness inside. The difference is mental illness is like addictions for introverts, because the thing that's making them unhealthy is an object inside of themselves, a thought, a voice, an idea, whatever it might be. I'm glossing over, the complexity of mental health and addictions. But essentially, if you want to think about how these things fit together, mental illness is addictions for introverts, and addiction is mental illness for extroverts. In terms of, you want to talk about that compulsion, that life-damaging disconnection, disconnection from self, disconnection from others, and that gets replaced with something unhealthy. That's a blockage, and it's trauma-induced. So, all of this happened in me. I work in the field. I'm working on my own healing. Watching Sadhguru and Joe talk just brought a light into me in terms of listen to these people who I respect and love and value. And I see I'm a part of that dialogue. I can be a part of that dialogue because what Joe is saying is the crisis that most people in our North American society are struggling with. And it's not just a question of people who are crippled with mental illness or crippled with addictions. It's not just about people in the streets or who are homeless or who are in the mental hospital or whatever it might be. Most people I know are struggling with these issues right now. Most people are in that gap between being ready to heal themselves and being trapped in their trauma history, whatever it might be, causing damage to the people around them, and that's where I am. That's where my healing is. And that's, I think, where I have something to give, and that is why I have begun this with you today. And so, because I've done damage to myself, I've done damage to people around me, I've made mistakes. In fact, my life is a catalog of mistakes. And yet all of my mistakes revolved around the single mistake of what happened to me when trauma dislocated me from my truth and my well-being. And that's what this is. This is my healing journey. And this is part one of my healing journey. And what I've tried to tell you today is frame what healing is and where it sits in culture and its importance. Because its importance is that most people are struggling. Almost everyone has an issue of mental health or addiction. And it's not just drugs, it's addictive processes everywhere because it's a compulsion and it's an unconsciousness. And the only answer to that is healing. And healing is a process which is real. It's a choice and it builds upon itself. And I can tell you that I have healed myself from my traumas. And that doesn't mean it's a finished state. I mean, it's an ongoing process. And the healing that I've done to this point has led me to this point of talking to you right now. And I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be, but this is the first step. And so this has been my podcast today, and I'm going to be back tomorrow or the next time, and I'm going to continue on with what I'm talking about. So I hope that was clear, sensible, and and valuable to you. And my last message is watch some Sadhguru and get interested in some of the things that Joe is talking about, because these are both people who are valuable and worthwhile. And I'll see you next time.